It's a pleasure to be here at TEDx Youth. I'm actually going to start off with a bit of an activity. So, can anyone tell me what this is? Oh, you can just yell.
Beach ball.
Beach ball, okay. How about this? Pirate ship, okay. How about that? Doll, ragdoll, okay. So what do all these things have in common? Toys, excellent. So that wasn't much of a challenge. I just want to make sure everyone was awake on Saturday morning. So in that vein, yes, those are all toys, and I'm willing to bet that in the first few weeks or first few months of your life, these were pretty relevant to you. These were pretty much what you were surrounded by and what a lot of your time was spent doing. Now, yes, they were toys. So what do you call this? A box, maybe a cardboard box. Would you consider that a toy?
Yes.
Sure. Well, not in the traditional sense, but yes, it is a toy, and what makes it a toy is the fact that it can kind of become anything. So it can become a pirate ship, or, it can become a time machine. It can become a duplicator, if we have any Calvin and Hobbes fans. The cardboard box is really only limited to your imagination. Now, if we go back to when you're first born and you're a baby, yes, you have all these toys, including a cardboard box at your disposal. Not only is it something that you can play with, but it's something that's actually given a lot of value. It's understood by parents and by adults that it's important for kids to play and important for babies to play. No one's going to look at a baby and say, well, why are they keep remaking that puzzle over and over again? That baby's wasting its time. No, it's considered appropriate and understandable. When you're a toddler, the play may get more complex, but it's still valued. And it isn't until you enter kindergarten that play maybe starts to become more structured. And for some reason, that seems to be the last speck of play that you see as a foundational part of your learning and your development, because you enter grade 1 and suddenly play is only happening outside. It's happening outside of the classroom. It's no longer considered part of your learning. So, what we are saying with getting rid of play within the classroom at the beginning of grade 1 and all throughout elementary school is that somehow play no longer equals learning, and beyond that, it's actually considered a distraction. It's considered counter to your work and to your development. And we're not quite sure why that is. And if we go back to the idea of this cardboard box, this approach to learning and to teaching starts to devalue the idea that that box is a time machine. Instead, we are now putting value towards getting that one right answer. This education model where you're searching for this, you get a question, you search for the one right answer. So, in essence, that cardboard box is exactly that. It is only a cardboard box. And what I want to talk about is the fact that that cardboard box is a cardboard box doesn't signify the fact that that cardboard box could be a number of things. Much like we all think and we learn differently. And our approaches to learning don't always look the same. The ways that we learn, the ways that we understand are completely different. And I just want to talk today about the idea that play is valuable. And its values aren't only in the idea that, yes, we can be fun, we can be imaginative, but it values and honors the idea that we all think and we all learn differently. So this journey actually started for me when I was a design student. So as Sarah mentioned, I'm a toy designer, but I wasn't always a toy designer. I was just learning design. And my thesis year, I was given this challenge of designing a device that would create understanding between a very special group of students. These students have visual impairment, which means that they have certain ranges of blindness, and they would be going to school with other children who are sighted. And I was given a task of designing a device that created understanding and bridged the communication gap between these two groups. I decided to take this opportunity and actually take the values of play and take those and test them. And so I thought, well, why not make my device a toy? And I'll make a toy and see if I can use the values of play to teach this understanding. So when I say understanding, I want to say understanding is quite a complex idea. So essentially what I honed in on was empathy and wanted to see if I could teach empathy through play. Now, some of you may know this a quote, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. That's essentially what empathy is. It's about understanding the feelings of another. And the best way to do that is really to share an experience with them. So I took on that task, and I actually came up with this three-dimensional puzzle that would be played with visually impaired children and their sighted classmates. And what was interesting was that it became very quick and apparent that it wasn't just for kids and it wasn't just for those with visual impairment, but in fact it created understanding across a number of abilities and ages. But before I speak too much about it, I actually would rather show you. So let's take a look.
Each piece actually has a different shape, a different texture. They actually have different tactile and semantic clues on them, and they connect. If I create that configuration, then the other player actually has to recreate that pattern. The challenge is that they are both blindfolded.
That has the, like that I said before, the like flower thing. Wait, what? I can't hear any of that. What are you saying? I wasn't focused.
You are connected to the large arrow on the side that has one dot protruding forward.
I just lost it.
So dots, and they're horizontal dots. They're going like parallel to the table.
Can you repeat that?
Place your two fingers parallel to your chest on the other side of the arrow.
Okay.
Hold on. Stick with me.
You should have the wood feeling or plastic feeling on your palm if you're holding it the way I am.
How are you holding it?
I can't see. I know that.
Okay, so the front is not the one with the arrow. The front is on the other side.
See, that's good.
I know we don't really know each other, man, but I feel like we're going through some stuff together right now.
So right now my arrow is pointing out towards the door.
Aha.
I think I'm onto something, Sean.
I think we're ready.
Okay.
All right, take your blindfold off.
Wow.
All right. So those are a few clips, actually, of a number of people that played the toys. These are a bit closer version of now the wooden sets that we've made. What's interesting is that, as you see, that they're having a lot of fun and they're trying to describe these shapes in different ways. But so much of the successes in playing this toy had much more to do with your profession, with your background, with your age. And had much more to do with your ability to empathize and to understand that person's point of view. When you're both blindfolded and trying to describe a shape or something that you've never had to describe before, you not only have to think of a creative way to describe that on your own, but how do I describe that to someone else? What was really interesting was a lot of people, including the visually impaired and the sighted children, called these pieces actually houses. And the first time that we played, one of the first children to play who's visually impaired, she actually called this piece a flower piece. And this piece actually doesn't have a name. And we've had many descriptions of it, a beat-up circle, when they stack together, a snowman, we've had a settings icon on a computer. And even when the pieces connect in thousands of different configurations, the overall shape, people get very creative and they start talking about the movement and the motion and they start helping the other person out. And what's really interesting is that through watching two people play, it's more than just two players. The third player is everyone else that is watching. And what we end up having is just this incredibly rich discussion about the insights that we see, both about how these two people communicated, but how we can take that further. So after designing this toy, I started seeing play not only as a tool for learning, but as a tool for really understanding and valuing the ways that we think differently. So I said earlier that play is foundational to our development. So how is that? Well, play provides experiential learning. So in the ways in which we learn have much more relevance if they're experiential, if you have an emotional attachment to them. Me standing here on stage and telling you isn't nearly as effective as you actually participating in your learning. When we had players play with the toys, because of that experience, they could then take the metaphor of play and put it directly into their lives and the way that they work and the way that they learn. Play creates a safe place to explore. By just introducing the game as, hey, we're just going to play a game, don't take it too seriously, it allowed for people to get deeper into the understanding of it, and then it actually let us have those deeper, more serious conversations. We've used the toys with an organization called Engineers Without Borders, and they work in some pretty tough situations, and when we really got to look deeper into how the toy then reflected that. And we had one player say, it's interesting because when we work with those communities, we're actually working blind. And we need to get them to tell us what they're going through. And beyond that, it lets us take risks. There is no one right way to play a certain game, and the way in which risks are then enabled is that you're allowed to take a jump or take a leap because it's just up to you. It's up to you and that other player and how you play. And it values diversity. I know that we said before that cardboard box can be anything. Well, the ways that we think are very different, and there's no one right answer, and play absolutely honors that and encourages this completely different way of bringing your viewpoints. We've had a lot of people bring their opinions into the toys and into the shapes. And lastly, it encourages collaboration and creativity. When we introduce the toy, we say, okay, well, you're the one that's going to describe the shape, and then we say to the other player, well, you're the one that's going to recreate it. And very quickly, that stops from being a one person telling, one person taking direction to a communication and a collaborative dialogue. And it's really incredible how that then gets owned. And actually, one of my favorite quotes is from an MIT professor, Henry Jenkins, who says that games teach that failure isn't bad and that collaboration isn't cheating. The idea that games teach that failure isn't bad is so important, especially in the ways in which we learn. Failure is part of learning. It isn't something that we should be scared of or that should be stigmatized. It's a crucial part of our development. And the idea that play values that and that it encourages that says a lot about the ways in which we think, but if we apply that approach to learning, it says a lot about the ways we think about our learners. So this all became very relevant to me actually when I was in design school. Now, when I entered design, I went straight from high school, and what was interesting that I discovered quickly was that half of my class was actually dyslexic. And now dyslexia is considered a learning disability. It means that you see shapes and you see letters in very different ways, and it can make it very difficult to read or to do well in English studies. And half of my class, or I wouldn't say half, but a huge majority of my class was dyslexic, and this three-dimensional way of viewing the world actually became a huge asset in our first year. And they were some of the best designers, and still some of the best designers that I know. But when they were growing up and they were in school, they were told that it wasn't worthwhile and that they were struggling. And beyond that, a lot of them just thought that they were stupid. And then I entered in a program where it was actually valued, and they were suddenly being accredited and awarded for this skill. And I actually looked further into it, and there's a number of famous and successful people that are actually dyslexic. They say that Leonardo da Vinci was dyslexic, Walt Disney, George Washington. We've had, was it John Lennon? There's a number of incredible people who were dyslexic. And I think if we put them in school today, if at some point they were told that they weren't worthwhile and they weren't smart, and beyond that, how many potential Da Vinci's that we're missing out on because we have this one way of looking at learning. And what I'm most concerned about is that if we don't play and we don't have this play approach, what is it that we're missing out on? So that actually brings me back to the first time that our toys actually went overseas. So this time last year, not-for-profit called Raising the Village asked us if they could bring their toys with them. Now they provide infrastructure, training, and tools to recovering communities in Uganda. And they thought that this toy would be a great device for them to bring to their daycare to teach empathy, communication, and teamwork to their students. That didn't entirely happen. Within 2 days, the founder, Sean, actually sent me this tweet. And he said, the results were not what we expected. And I sheepishly said, well, what do you mean? What do you mean the results weren't what we expected? And then he wrote me back this. We didn't realize the kids had never played with toys in their entire lives before. That really hit myself and Sean hard because we had made an assumption that, okay, we'll bring toys in and they'll teach them empathy, without even realizing that within their situation, they actually didn't have toys. They'd never seen toys before. That doesn't mean that they didn't have play. That doesn't mean that they used the materials that they have and they played sports and had exercises, but they'd never seen a product or an object whose sole purpose was for play, whose sole purpose was for this playful approach. And what ended up happening was that we didn't actually get to teaching them empathy or creativity or collaboration. What ended up happening is that this organization ended up finding a lot more insights into the students and into how their program worked. When they had especially the girls play it, they realized that they were lacking a lot in confidence. They weren't speaking up very much. Almost all the children had a hesitation in asking questions, which had a lot more to do with their education system, which is much more top-down. And so asking questions isn't necessarily encouraged. And what was interesting was that instead of going there and trying to help these kids, instead we ended up finding out huge insights into that organization and how they could better help them with their program. And so this, to me, just kind of brings home the value of play. If we had never brought those toys in or played, we would have never gotten those insights. And what I want to leave with you today is that play is not something that's just frivolous or something that is dismissed. And I think that it's important that we both reclaim play. But when I say that, I don't mean that if play starts to happen, just let it happen, or that we should tolerate it, or that we just shouldn't discourage it. I'm saying that we need to actively bring play back. We need to bring play into our curriculum, and we need to use play as a means for learning, because we can't value this learning without an approach that everyone thinks and thinks differently and views the world differently. And play absolutely provides that. And the thing that's most important is that with a playful approach to learning, a school is saying something not just about the way that they view education, but the way that they view their learners. And so I'd like to say that play is something that's valued and something that's important, not just in the classroom or the workplace or in these unexpected places, but it's something that doesn't stop having value after the age of 6. So I'd just like to let you know, keep playing. Thank you very much.